computer. Okay.
Okay.
And we must be ready there. Hey there. This is Connie Wilson, and we're having a little Smart Start update for you for this special session coming up. And you can see on the screen. Tell everybody, hi, Matt.
Hey there.
Hey there. All of you know Matt Gross. He was awesome working with Smart Start for many, many years. In fact, he and I came on board together back in 2011, and we've been through some pretty good wars. And just wanted to have him on today for a few minutes to share what's going on over at DHHS with early education, what he sees coming down the pike for the short session for early ed, and then just to throw out some thoughts for the next long session, because there is a budget shortfall that's forecasted, and there's so much going on. Who knows what's going to happen with these elections? So Matt, why don't you go ahead and take it away, sir?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I've still got my Smart Start mug that I drink out of on a regular basis, as does Mike, who says hello to everybody. So thanks for having me. Yeah, there's a lot going on, of course, in the early childhood space, as always, particularly around with the COVID response. So I guess I'll back up a little bit and start with the end of last session. One of the big things that we negotiated at the end of session was Senate Bill 808, which was initially just a Medicaid transformation bill, but we recognized that was going to be essentially the HHS committee budget. So the last piece of that negotiation, we were happy to get into that bill, was an additional $20 million for early childhood, of which 5 went to Smart Start, the other 15 to help support centers. So we're glad to get that in there. Just yesterday, Governor Cooper released his proposed budget for the upcoming session that's going to happen next week. I think it's going to be a very short session, just a couple days. And what happened with 808, I started there because it kind of ties back into what's in this bill. So there's two things to look for in the governor's package. The first one is on page 7, which really is a continuation of this of some of the supports to child care centers that we know are critical. And that is item 6, which is stabilization of early childhood services. And that's $40 million from the remaining federal CARES money that we have to provide PPE, sanitation supplies, early educator bonus payments, and operational grants to help set revenue losses that we know are really challenging the already delicate budget structure of child care centers. Another thing I'll point to in that budget is related to all the Leandro work, which I know was going really hot and heavy before COVID overtook all of our lives. And if you look up in his budget at page 2, the first item, there's a provision there, $50 million for a sound and basic public education. And then within that, specifically $12.3 million is to go to the early education system to increase NC pre-K rates and increase funding to Smart Start. That is all non-recurring money. There's really not any recurring money available right now, but that is another item that's in his budget. So yet to see what the legislature will take up when they come back, but I'd say pointing to those would be really, really helpful. The first one, of course, ties to the Leandro work, and then the second one is using the CARES dollars. So happy to have that in the governor's budget. One of the challenges when we look at the session up ahead, when they scheduled it for September, the thought was we'd have a new federal package by now. And unfortunately, those conversations have really ground to a halt. I was talking fairly regularly with Senator Burr and Senator Tillis's offices in the first part of August, and they felt optimistic around the second week, and sadly, things have ground to a halt. I'll say on an optimistic front, both the House and Senate package at the federal level were really good for early education. It was actually one of the few places where the Senate package outspent the House package. So I'm hopeful that when the negotiations start to crank back up there, that at least with both bodies recognizing the critical role that early childhood is playing in the pandemic response, that we'll see a good federal package. But without that, it really limits what the state can do at this point in time. One of the important things to remember with the CARES dollars we have is that money needs to be spent by the end of the calendar year. And that's not just allocated, that is out, checks cashed. Rob Kinzvater, another blast in the past for many of you, has been really pushing folks hard with our CARES appropriations to make sure that we actually can get the money spent, because if we don't, it reverts to the Fed. So that's really the big chunk we're looking to spend when we come back to session here in September. As you've all been facing, one of the biggest challenges here is not only what's going on in the early childhood space, but also what's going on in the school age care space. And while I know the Smart Start mission is broke to 5, a lot of us have been transitioning over into focusing on the birth to 8 work, and some of you have funding to do work more birth to 8. One of the challenges that we're seeing is, while there is capacity within the system to take on some of the school-age kids that need care, it isn't available in every single county. So one of the things that the Child Care Commission passed about 3 weeks ago now was an emergency rule to allow LEAs, local education authorities, to enter into contracts with community-based organizations, or CBOs is the acronym we're using, to set up remote learning centers for children. What we've heard thus far is a lot of the LEAs have been hesitant to enter into those agreements, which has led some groups to want to push for some pretty significant temporary but still significant deregulation in the childcare space that has us fairly concerned. We think it's really critical that what's going on here is truly an extension of the K-12 day. In fact, the reason we chose to go the route of a contract with the school is to have the accountability go with the school system and say, listen, you are still responsible for the education of students in North Carolina. And although you're in Plan B or Plan C and having remote learning pieces to it, you need to be the ones that are responsible for setting up good remote learning agreements. So we just yesterday put out 2 sample contracts that have been signed in a couple other counties to help expedite that process, meeting with stakeholders to try to see how we can provide whatever support is needed to get those contracts up and running so the schools can enter into the agreements with community organizations to provide remote learning centers, but wanting to make it very clear this is remote learning and an extension of K-12. The wrong solution here is to go in and start deregulating in the childcare space. We know that puts licensed care at that much more of a disadvantage, and they're already struggling. It backtracks on a really important work that's gone over the last 30 years to make North Carolina's early childhood system so strong. But I am a little nervous heading into this session. We could see some bad policy in that place. So I would say in your conversations with legislators, really push folks towards the MOU solution. And if there's things the legislature needs to do to help incentivize schools to enter into those contracts with community-based organizations, that's a really important solution so it doesn't mess with the early childhood space. So I think that's what I see on the horizon for session next week. Connie, happy to pause and see what else you want to talk about.
Well, I know the governor came out with his budget, but it just came out the week before they're going in. Everybody was planning on just a 2-day deal. And we appreciate all that the governor's recommended there, but it's probably likely that they're only going to be dealing with CARES Act money. And that has limitations on what it can be used for.
Yeah.
And so I know that we had Catherine Restrepo come, and she's staff person for Senator Berger, come and visit with our Randolph partnership. Lisa Hayworth did a great job taking her around and educating her. And I know there are discussions about early ed money, maybe 30 or 40 million is what we've been pushing for. The governor has that in his budget. So next week it's either 540 that they're trying to allocate from the CARES Act, maybe more, we'll see. What do you see happening next year, and what do they need to do to prepare? Because I'm seeing numbers now, maybe 2 or 3 billion, not 4 billion short, but billion here, billion there is real money.
Yeah, it's very real money. I think there is reason to be a little concerned heading into the upcoming fiscal year, that being fiscal year 21-22. We know that with the downturn of the economy because of COVID-19, that there's a big reduction in revenue. We all went through this together. Like Connie said, we started in 2011. It was certainly a stressful time, maybe a little PTSD for those of you watching this that were a part of that. One of the things that was really vital to Smart Start getting through 2011, and what they had to do then was a $3 billion budget cut. The thing that was vital were the relationships that you had forged on the local level with legislators. As you recall, there was a party change then, which really the big thing that happened there is you had a lot of new folks in power that hadn't been there before. Well, looking at the legislature right now, where there is a chance there could be a party change this fall, even if there isn't one, there's going to be a lot of new faces that we're working with. The names that we've come to rely on in the past. Representative Dobson is not going to be there. Representative Horn is not going to be there. Building those relationships with a lot of the new members of the House, and also on the Senate side, where I think Senator Kravic has really stepped up into the early childhood space. I think building more champions on the Senate side, and Senator Heiss will of course always be there. Senator Heiss really stepped out of the HHS space last session. He said he was going to do it where he still got involved with some of the Medicaid work. For the other pieces, he really wasn't as involved. So building those relationships, and I think one of the things that Smart Start is still challenging with it is, on one hand, it is the way you'd want to design a program because of the way it can meet local need. On the other hand, it is still a little challenging to talk about because it can be nebulous at times. So continuing to focus on the big bodies of work, the impact you're making on your community. And then one of the things I always tell legislators is, if you want to get something done, give it to Smart Start. I think the Dolly Parton work was such a great example of that. I don't know of another entity that could take that money, launch it, and get it going statewide in every county as quickly and effectively as Smart Start. So while I know that next year they'll be looking at cuts, there's still going to be important work to get done. So I think showing the role that Smart Start plays and being able to to be able to effectively execute work to improve the lives of children and families in North Carolina, telling that story, getting engaged with your members, building those relationships. You never know who's going to be in what committee. This time in 2010, Justin Burr was just a freshman member with no power. Little did we know that he was going to be in charge of the health committee less than 6 months later. In 2012, when Josh Dobson came in, didn't know that he was going to end up being one of the biggest champions we need on the House side. So you don't know who the next champion is going to be. So it doesn't matter whether your member's on the health committee, whether your member's ever been engaged in early childhood. Reach out to them, forge those relationships, do Zoom calls, do what you have to do to get engaged with them. But it is never too early to start that. And it's going to be really, really critical as they have to make tough decisions. Legislators are always bombarded during session, but when they can think back to the experiences they had in their district, the visits they had, the work they've seen, they're going to think, I remember learning about that, and I think it's valuable, and we need to protect it to help give them the ownership of the work. So there's not reason to panic now, but there's reason to be vigilant and to forge those relationships, because it's going to really, it's the work you do now to develop those relationships is going to be what pays off when budget decisions are being made in May, June, July of next year.
Okay. Thank you for all those great comments. Matt, what you did at Smart Start still benefits us today. And I know you're watching our backside as you're behind the scenes working on stuff. So all I can say is thank you so much for everything. I know you took time out of a very tight schedule to talk to the EDs, and we can't thank you enough. And we will keep working with you, and we will take all your advice.
Great. Well, it's great to chat with you again. As I said when I transitioned away several years ago, that we all continue to work for Smart Start. I think I actually was able to get more money for Smart Start this year than I was ever able to actually get for Smart Start when I was there. So it was nice to get that little victory this year, and we'll all continue to fight for you. Early ed and Smart Start is a huge priority for us, the administration and DHHS, and I'll continue to fight for it every step along the way. So thanks for having me, Connie, and great to talk to everybody.
Okay, good. Everybody have a good day. Bye.